Welcome back to video 7 in the Hidden Art of Homemaking series. All right, guys, welcome back. I'm Laura Wilkie with Down Home with Lemon Pie. This is the Hidden Art of Homemaking video series where I am going through this book chapter by chapter, and we are on video 7, which is going to be chapter, is it 8? Yes, chapter 8. So thank you for joining us. If you are brand new to this series and you're enjoying it, or you want to go back and check out the other videos in this series, they are linked below in their very own playlist called The Hidden Art of Homemaking, so it's easy to find. All right, so let's get started. So this chapter is all about food. That is what it's called, the food chapter. Super cute illustrations here. And I like this chapter because whether you want to or not, it is something that we can all relate to because it's food. We all eat food. We have food every single day. And yeah, for all different reasons. For nourishment is the obvious reason, but also for fun and for fellowship and companions and all kinds of things. So she talks a little bit about that. This is kind of a longer chapter, so I am going to be going fairly quickly through it, and I'm going to be skimming over some parts, which is why I recommend that you guys go ahead and purchase your own copy of this book because, yeah, it's totally worth it. And no, I don't get any kind of kickback from that. I wish I did, but I don't. So I'm just a normal mom and encouraging you guys to read something that I thought would help you because it does help us as well. So right off the bat, she starts talking about God who created us to need food and created the food that we need. Obviously, one of the first mentions in the Bible of food that we can all think about is when the children of Israel were in the wilderness and God provided them with food. We know he provided them with something called manna, and she talks about how that must have had all of the nutrients and things that we need for a balanced diet because that's all he provided. However, as we are humans, we probably would have been the same way, and the Israelites, instead of appreciating it, began to be hungry for the things that they were used to, the leeks and the garlic and the meat that they had enjoyed in Egypt. And they weren't really that thankful for the manna, which they found kind of rather boring. And they started to complain loudly. We read about this story in the Bible. It's talking about when Moses led the people out. So she says, this was wrong, not because it is wrong to enjoy a variety of flavors, but because God had promised them that marvelous things lay ahead, marvelous food and other things, and they really didn't believe that that was true. They weren't looking forward with faith and weren't trusting in that God would provide for his promises. So nor did they, this is kind of a good one, nor did they appreciate his way of caring for them at the present moment, which I think is so often the case. It is so often the case. Wherever you are in life, it can be very hard to appreciate where you are if it's not where you want to be. And I've actually, interestingly enough, I've touched on this kind of in several videos in the recent months just because it keeps coming up. And I think it's a good thing. Maybe God's trying to work on my heart or my viewers' hearts. I don't know, but I think it's a very good thing just to keep reminding us that we need to be patient wherever we are. So their complaining was an indication of a lack of trust, that the manna was temporary, and a lack of appreciation of the fact that it was a marvelous food while traveling to that which lay ahead, but it was not meant to be permanent. So that's a very good reminder, I think. So we cannot imagine just eating one kind of food like these people were doing. We can't imagine that because we have so many different varieties and flavors and textures, and we have taste buds. My daughter calls them taste bugs, and but we have taste buds and senses of smell. And we have lots of favorites, lots of things that we enjoy. And it says, God has not given us sensitivities and appreciations which cannot be fulfilled anywhere in the universe that he created. God made man with tremendous diversity in many areas, including the area of enjoyment of food and the diversity of foods. So skipping ahead a little bit here, She also talks about when Jesus had some meals in the Bible. She talks about Jesus having broiled fish on the seashore, cooking it for breakfast with the disciples, how he had simple suppers with fishermen and wedding feasts with many guests. He ate a home meal with Mary and Martha, and the menu which the publicans and sinners prepared. So, does it seem logical that God would be better pleased if we ignored food altogether and we ate only with the motive of taking in nourishment? I feel like this is a very common, I don't want to say trend, but kind of like a trend in the world right now, where so many people are so focused on diet and weight and all these things, and they're just very... Food is for nourishment. Don't make it, your enjoyment. And I like that she's touching on this. She says, the Bible says that God created things for us to enjoy richly. And although sin has spoiled so much that complete enjoyment is now impossible, she says there will be times when it is more important to continue to doing other things. She lists some examples here, but to have other things where you can't sit down and take the time to either prepare or enjoy a meal with the proper fulfillment, I guess, like in the whole picture of enjoying that meal. And I like that she's kind of bringing that around, because we live in a fast-paced world. There's lots of times when we can't sit down, but when we can, it is cherished and it is beautiful. As a regular, normal part of life, we are not asked to deny ourselves of food and beauty, variety, and originality of God's creation in this area to be enjoyed. Cooking is an art. There are so many videos that come across my news feeds or different things of people who are excellent at creating art with food. And no, I am not that great at that in that manner, but I do try. And I do my best to do what I can do. And that's what it's kind of talking about here, practicing. And she says, everyone who has to cook, wants to cook, or can cook, cooking should not be thought of as drudgery, but an art. I feel like so many times growing up or whenever, even in like some of my own personal times when I'm being a mom, that cooking has been thought of as a drudgery, as like a chore, like, oh, we have to get dinner, And she says we don't need to think of it that way. Talent in this art form differs and would not be identical in each individual, even if developed, but that is not the same thing as not recognizing it as an art form and not attempting to develop it. So I do like that she's, just encouraging us to do that, to take it that step further and make it that importance, because it matters in our homes. The danger today. Yes, this book was written in the 70s, and the danger she has written about for today is still very common. I would even say more common in today's world than it was in the 70s, because she starts to talk about the shortcut of using prepared foods, frozen foods all the time, using things from packages, bottles, tins, cans, rather than starting with fresh food or food from one's garden. I did, I think 2 videos in the past, fairly recently, about all of the crazy things in our food these days and how to navigate that. I'll link them below if you're interested, but it's like you need a whole nother degree like to navigate the food in the stores. And honestly, what it comes down to is just getting back to our roots, getting back to the very basics. She says, I realize that many, perhaps most people, don't have a garden, but one can at least try to get away from the plastic trend in the area of cooking, and it is healthy in several meanings of that word to try to do so. Yeah, it is. Even the things we use to cook with, like talking about the plastic trend or the silicone or all these things, are they the best choices? I don't know. Are they? Is it better to have cast iron and wooden spoons, which is what we use in our home, or to have a bunch of, you know, Teflon coated pans and plastic spoons? I think we can all know the answer, but do some research if you don't know and see what you come up with. She says, make your own bread and rolls once in a while, maybe once a week. She talks here about all the things that you can make from a very basic, simple dough. Like if you have a dough recipe that's very basic, you can make so much more than just a loaf of bread. And I did not realize that when I first started cooking, and then quickly, or baking it quickly, it came about. And I was so surprised at how I can use one recipe in many ways. And it wasn't, you know, cooking wasn't so complicated anymore when you realize that. For example, I have a great biscuit recipe, and I make homemade biscuits 2-3 times a week, but I can also easily take that and turn it into like a garlic herb biscuit, or like the cheddar biscuits, or I can turn it into the dumplings and chicken and dumplings, and it's literally the same recipe every single time. And so it's not a whole new thing that I have to learn. Bread is the same way. You can make a loaf of bread with the same dough that you can make cinnamon rolls, the same dough you can make pretzels or breadsticks, or all these different things that are delicious. I actually just recently had sourdough bread, the dough that wasn't really rising like I wanted it to, and I turned it into a flatbread, and it was wonderful. I also had a time when the sourdough, I just decided to, there's nothing wrong with it, but I decided to turn the dough into bagels, and I thought they turned out well. And there's just so many things that we have gotten so far away from that we don't realize now. And I think learning those skills is just important. It's so important. So she goes into a lot of this. She also talks about doing homemade cakes, pies, soups, from your vegetables, jams, jellies, relishes. I feel like all of this is lost arts that are falling away. And in recent years, people are trying to relearn, and I'm so glad, because it's so good. You know, this is Mother Culture Monday, and this is the day when I talk to you guys about all things related to motherhood. But I also do a series on Fridays, and it is Homeschool Fellowship Friday, when I talk to you guys about all things related to homeschool. And truth be told, I would say that canning and cooking from scratch would be total homeschool lessons. Like those should be full-on subjects that we should spend years teaching, same as we do with, you know, history or science. And we don't just incorporate those, but we totally should. She talks about how to get your kids involved, and that is something that I see so many people are I would say probably overcautious about, or they're scared of making the mess. I get the mess, I get it, but it's so necessary, because if you don't let them learn those skills, you will be the one doing all of the cooking forever. And so there will be never a break for you. There'll never be a time when you can kick your heels up and let someone else take over, especially maybe if you got injured or if you are older. Those things are important to pass those skills on to the younger generation. So she talks about this, a child cutting up carrots. I love this sentence so much, because this is how I raise my kids, with this kind of mindset. And I feel like so many people do not. And she says, I'm going to quote it, "A child can cut up carrots at a very early age with no more risk of injury than from falling down outside at play." It is so true, because there are so many things that we can do and let our kids do that, you know, we fall away from, because we think, oh, they're going to get hurt, or don't let them do this, don't let them use a knife, don't let them whatever. And it doesn't need to be that way. All right, moving on. She goes right into talking about the kitchen and how no matter what kind of home you have, the kitchen becomes like the heart of the home, the place where you bring your guests, where you share meals, where you share treats, where you have tea, where you discuss things, where you make plans. It's just the heart of the home. There's something cozy and warm about it. She says, you know, it's there, and it's in the kitchen. It's where we eat. So Foods should be chosen for nutritive values, of course, but also having a variety and to interest in the meals. I love where she goes with this next. She starts talking about ways you can make your meals more interesting, more appealing, maybe to the flavors, but also to the way it looks. I have a great friend and she is so good at this, and she would post pictures and things of the fun meals that she made with her kids, and I jumped on board because years ago I realized I was not doing that and I was just trying to get dinner done, and it was a good wake-up call for me to enjoy those moments as well. So it was really good. But I am going to call her out a little bit here because she says she says it's totally unnecessary for any home to fall into the rut of serving the same meal the same day each week. And honestly, we do that for breakfast and it is so easy. It makes it so much easier for me to not have to plan 7 meals times 3 meals a day per week, and to know that just breakfast is the same. It makes it easy for shopping, it makes it easy for serving, but we do vary it up some. So I guess it is not exactly the same, but it's the same idea. It's some sort of oatmeal or cereal thing on certain days, some sort of eggy thing on other days, and sometimes it's scrambled eggs, sometimes it's on bread, sometimes it's on avocado toast, sometimes. So it is varied, but it's pretty similar throughout the week. I also love here where she talks about making a meal go further. She says chicken for 6 people can easily be enough for 12 if you cut it off the bones. Make it into a Chinese meal by adding onions, peppers, almonds, and pineapple wedges. Yes, absolutely. I did a whole video on this, on how to stretch meals to like maximum capacity, I guess. But whether you're feeding a crowd or whether you just have a big family like we do, or whether you just want to have extra food or whatever, I did a whole video. I will link it below because I feel like these kinds of food things they're things that we should know and we're not being taught. So I thought it was good. I like here how she talks next about making sure that you're using each and every bit of your food, not just throwing away all the leftovers. But we typically give a lot of leftovers to our dog, but and you may too. When we had farm animals, we put them out for our different animals and they enjoyed it. But making sure you're not just throwing it in the trash is the idea here. And it's true. There are so many things we can do with the leftover bits. Sometimes if I have a little bit of vegetables for a couple days, I'll just mix them all together one day for that dinner, right? Or I'll throw them into a soup or something, or even into the freezer for the next time I make soup, so that they're not just tossed in the trash and wasted. She talks about that and she discusses it as a Christian, as recognizing your responsibility to share and to be careful not to waste food. I like how she addresses it. Let's see. Yeah, she kind of goes on for a while there, but let's see what's next, because like I said, this is kind of a long chapter, so I'm not going to touch on every single detail. She does talk here about eye appeal, taste appeal, like I was saying, with the food, making it look beautiful on the plates. And I try to do this more and more often, especially in recent years. For example, not just throwing a pile of rice on the plate, but using an ice cream scoop to scoop it and it's a beautiful little mound. Those kinds of things. Maybe, like for example, last night we had tacos with refried beans or the pinto beans, and I had them on their plate, and then I put it, maybe you don't, but when you go to a restaurant, often they'll take one chip and put it up in the beans and make it just cute. And I added that as a little touch. Didn't take but a second, and it made it just that much little cuter, right? And so it was just a little bit more appealing. She talks about, this one made me laugh. She talks about how to dress up a baked potato, but honestly, her details here, isn't that how everyone eats a baked potato? She says, scored with a crisscross, the fluffy white insides pinched up with butter and parsley, sour cream, or chives. Isn't that how everyone eats it? I'm just saying, did they not do that in the 70s? I don't know, but that's how we eat them now. So that's pretty common. But then she gives some other ideas. Again, I'm not going to go through all of them here, but they are pretty cute little, just simple little things. There's actually a recipe at the bottom for a baked stuffed tomato. So if you want to look into that, it sounds delicious. And then of course, eating with the seasons. I've talked about that before. Each season brings its own possibilities of flavors and treats and beauty, and eating with the seasons is not only cost effective, but it's easy. It makes it you're able to find what you need because it's the stuff that's available, right? And it's also the stuff that's inexpensive. So meals can be very small indeed, and very inexpensive. We don't have to make them extravagant, but we can still make them appealing and interesting. Children feel the difference in the home that takes this attitude. I totally agree with that. I remember once we didn't have a lot of money, but I was able to pick up some peaches, which were very expensive at the time. And I picked up some peaches. I think I was only able to get like 2 or 3. And anyways, the day it came down to, I only had 1 left, and I wanted it to go as far as I could make it. So I took it and I cut half of it into little tiny pieces, and I put it on the kids' oatmeal that day, and they were excited. And then I had a whole nother half that I saved, and we just added little slices, and I made them really thin on the side of their plate at lunch. And they thought they had peaches all day long, and it was literally 1 peach and 3 kiddos, and I shared it for 2 meals. And so just taking that time to be really aware and very intentional about making sure that we have these little touches, and it doesn't have to be expensive. I remember being so proud of myself because I had made this peach stretch so far. And let's see. Okay, this is the next thing here is very good. Is this the part where she's talking? No, sorry, I'm not there yet. Okay, but this part's good too. Food cannot take care of spiritual, psychological, and emotional problems, but the feeling of being loved and cared for, the actual comfort of the beauty and flavor of food, the increase of blood sugar and physical well-being help one to go on during the next hours better equipped to meet problems. Okay, I love this next quote, and this is kind of what this whole thing is all about with this entire book. Like if you wanted to sum up this whole book into 1 quote, this is probably the one I would pick. The wife in a family, her attitude towards the marriage as a whole should be to think of it as a career. I love it because it is. It is a beautiful job, task that we have been given as moms by God, and we should make it that. It should have that importance on it that, of course you're not going to get fired, but it should have that importance, like that you're trying your best so that you don't, get fired, basically. Of course you're not going to, but that's how you would strive if it was a job, right? You would strive for the very best. Being challenged by what a difference her cooking and her way of serving is going to make in the family. I love that because it does make a difference. And when mom's sick, the meals are not the same meals that mom would have prepared. They're not, whether they're prepared by an older sibling or a grandparent or by dad or whatever, they're not the same. They're not the same because there's something about it that moms have that make it just special. She even talks about doing things while traveling. We do this 100%. We have 7 kiddos, if you don't know, and that makes 9 of us. And anytime we travel, it is very expensive to eat out every meal, every day. And so we just don't. We skip as many as we can. So what we do is we do a lot of these ideas here. We'll buy things that, often hotels' rooms will have little mini fridges, and they'll have microwaves. We utilize those. We go to the grocery store. We get things that we can make for breakfast if it's not included at the hotel. We get things that we can make for lunches or dinners. You can even, and I love the idea. So she says, you can buy a cooked chicken. We've all seen that at the grocery store, the chicken that's already cooked. And honestly, it's not that much more than buying it raw, right? And then she talks about some simple veggies and fruits, some things that you can add to it, some rolls, some butter, some of these very simple things. And it just makes it, of course, it's inexpensive, right? It's huge time saver as far as taking the kids out when they're tired and they're cranky in the restaurant. It's just not ideal. So I love this. This is what we do. She talks about it being interesting and fun. Yeah, everybody loves a restaurant, of course, but once you have little kids and you have a lot of them, it's just not enjoyable to go to a restaurant. It's more fun to be able to be home or somewhere, like if you're at a hotel, where the kids can just run and play and be free and they don't have to sit at a table for a certain amount of time, and it's just not practical. So it is more enjoyable to just do it at home. Food and mealtime shared have always been thought of as a closer kind of communication than simply talking to people. Think about times in your life when you've had good conversations with people, and often those times are centered or include meal times or food times, right? And that's what we do. We're humans. That's what we do, and we enjoy it. The refusal to eat with another person at the same table is the negative. Some people, even some Christians, refuse to eat with someone because of their color, language, tribe, or nation. I don't understand this. And she goes into how she doesn't understand it either, because we're all Christians, or we're all people, or whatever, created by God. And so it's okay for us to enjoy together. And not only that, when you eat with someone who is from another culture, you can learn so much about their culture, about the food that they have, about the ingredients they use, the way they present it on a plate, just so much that you can just incorporate into your own home. Then she goes into talking about how Christ says that he will come and sit down at our table, whether it is the table of someone eating alone or a table crowded with people, and how each meal should be as though you're eating with Jesus. Now, I totally get this, but sometimes it's impractical, and Jesus gets that. I feel like he really does. So, but I get where she's coming from with this, like wanting us to take that time and thought into our meals and not just be something that we just fluff off as something to get through so we can get to bath time or whatever. And so I do like that. Now, the next thing I really like, this is the one I was talking about a minute ago. She talks about a person coming to their home, and he didn't have any food. He would have been a homeless person, and just asking for a meal. And she talks about how she didn't just throw a meal at him, right? She didn't even just throw money at him, but she went in. She took the time to make a nice meal for him. She goes into all the details. It's a beautiful story. And she talks about things and how it wasn't a hardship. It was some leftovers they had from here and some stuff from here. She dressed it up a little to make it pretty. She involved her child or children, and how it was a good teaching moment for them on how to serve others. And I just loved it so much. If you, like I said, get this book so you can go through it, because I don't have time to go all the way through it. She gives a recipe for corn chowder here, and it's just important, I think, for us to get our kids involved. And this is a good way, is by serving others, and meals and food is a great way to serve others. So I do really like that. I like how she approached it. And, she said, perhaps they were taking advantage of us. Perhaps the password, she talks about how they had the mark on their curb, which told other people who were homeless that they would help them. She said, perhaps we were an easy mark, but no matter. Some positive things were taking place. First of all, it was not hurting me. It was developing my outlet for creativity. She says, first of all, it was not hurting me. It was developing an outlet for creativity. Second, it was giving an opportunity to do something directly for the Lord. Third, it was an opportunity to make direct contact with few individuals. that they don't normally have contact with. Fourth, it was a part of their child's education. There's so many things, you know, sometimes we think, oh, those people don't need money, or it's not really true. They, you know, people who have signs on the road or whatever. And that's not really up to us. It's not really up to us to judge. It's up to us to help and to be Jesus to them. And if we were wrong, we were doing what was right in God's eyes. And the other person has to take that up with God. So whether or not they're taking advantage of you is not the issue. The issue is, what are you going to do? And I love how she goes through this. It's so good. So yeah, it's a good little story. It goes on for a few pages. But in conclusion, hidden art in the form of cooking and serving food has a wide number of possibilities. And as everybody eats every day, there is no exaggeration to say that it affects every one of us. I agree. And I think it's great. I'm glad that she, included food in the homemaking book, because yeah, it was a good one. So next week we are going to be diving into writing, prose and poetry. I'm not sure how I feel about that one, or where she's going to go with that. So we will look into it next week. So stay tuned for that if you haven't already. Also, I do want to remind you guys, if you are a subscriber but you are not receiving notifications, do go to the main page on YouTube, click where it says you're a subscriber, and make sure you select all, because that could be the reason you're not receiving notifications. All right, so I'll see you guys next time.